Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey, one of heartbreak, rediscovery, and the quiet strength it takes to start over. In today's story, we meet Linda, a woman who thought she had it all figured out, until at 60, her husband walked out, and her own son turned her away when she needed him most. Left with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart, Linda embarks on an unexpected path towards self-love, freedom, and a new beginning. This isn't just a story about loss, it's about finding yourself when the world forgets who you are. Let's begin. I never imagined that at 60 years old, I would be sitting alone in my car, parked just outside my son's farmhouse, with nowhere to go. But there I was, under a night sky painted in stars I barely noticed, staring at the soft, golden lights spilling from the windows where Daniel and his wife Rachel were hosting a dinner party. My eyes stung from tears that hadn't stopped since I left home earlier that evening, the dashboard lights casting my reflection in a strange, almost unfamiliar hue. Just 12 hours earlier, I had a husband, a home, and the quiet certainty that my children would always be my safe place. And now? I had a hastily packed suitcase in my trunk, and a deep, aching sense that everything I had built over the past 3.5 decades had quietly, devastatingly fallen apart. It had begun like any other crisp October morning in Willow Creek. The leaves outside our bedroom window were turning that beautiful, fiery shade of amber and rust. The kind of view that makes you pause mid-coffee and whisper, "This is home." I had been at the kitchen island, sipping from my favorite mug, planning Thanksgiving, my favorite holiday. I was thinking about centerpieces and apple pies when I casually suggested to Tom, my husband of 35 years, what if we invite Rachel's parents this year? Daniel said they might not have plans, and it would be lovely to get to know them better. Tom didn't even look up from his toast. "Whatever you want to do, Linda," he said flatly. It was such an uncharacteristic tone from him, muted, almost as though something inside had already given up. I set my mug down slowly. "Is everything all right?" He looked up then, his blue eyes unreadable behind his glasses. "We need to talk," he said, each word perfectly measured. "But not now. Tonight, after dinner." A chill crept into me that no warm kitchen could undo. I knew those words too well. They never precede good news. The waiting was unbearable. By early afternoon, I couldn't take the silence or the tightness in my chest, so I decided to drive out to Daniel and Rachel's. I convinced myself I wanted to talk Thanksgiving logistics, but deep down, I just needed the distraction, the presence of someone I loved, some reassurance that I was still rooted somewhere. The countryside drive usually calmed me. Gentle hills, horses grazing, that endless sky stretching above, but not that day. I gripped the wheel harder than necessary, my thoughts spiraling from Tom's mysterious statement to all the worst possibilities. Was it illness? Financial ruin? A secret? I arrived to find unfamiliar cars in their driveway. I hesitated, but I'd brought apple cider and cinnamon donuts from the farmer's market, something to share, something to anchor me. Daniel opened the door, his smile faltering the moment he saw me. "Mom?" he said, as though he hadn't expected me to exist outside the boundaries of holidays and scheduled calls. Before I could answer, Rachel's mother, a woman I had met only once, stepped into view. "Linda, what a surprise." It wasn't meant as warmth. It was meant as a warning. I was told, between strained smiles and awkward silences, that Rachel was pregnant. Everyone had known for a week. Everyone but me, the grandmother. The table was set for celebration. Their celebration, and there was no seat for me. I smiled through the sting, handed Daniel the pastries, and excused myself quickly. As I turned, Rachel's mother offered a hollow, "Why don't you join us?" Her tone made it clear the answer should be no. And so, I left, quietly, just as laughter resumed behind the closed door. That was the first real crack. Not the announcement Tom would make later. Not the way Daniel didn't chase after me, or even check if I'd made it home safe. No, it was the realization that I had somehow become an afterthought in my own family. And later that night, when Tom finally sat across from me and calmly said, "Linda, I want a divorce," I wasn't even surprised. Not really. just hollowed out as though I had been preparing for this moment all day without knowing it. By then, the suitcase was already half packed in my mind. I checked into the Willow Creek Inn that night with nothing but my purse and the clothes I had on. I hadn't packed a bag. I hadn't even thought to. There was no planning, only motion. A quiet, desperate need to escape from the house that no longer felt like mine. The young woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. She slid a key across the counter with a glance that said she'd seen worse, and I was quietly grateful for the anonymity. Room 214 was small, sterile, with beige walls and a stiff bed covered in white sheets that felt too clean, too impersonal. I sat on the edge of the mattress, still wearing my coat, staring at the mirror across the room. The woman looking back at me didn't look like someone who had once hosted flawless Thanksgiving dinners or soothed scraped knees with warm cookies. She looked like a stranger. Gray-streaked hair frayed at the edges, mascara smudged under her eyes, shoulders hunched with the weight of being unwanted. Tom had already signed the lease for his new apartment 3 weeks earlier. While I'd been ordering new place cards and candles for the Thanksgiving table, he'd been preparing to leave. The betrayal felt old and fresh at once, like a wound that had always been there, now torn open. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat, empty. Eventually, I called Emily. My daughter, my sweet, overworked, practical Emily. She answered on the first ring. Mom? James called me. Where are you? I'm at a hotel, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I just needed a little time. A hotel? Why didn't you come here? She asked. You've got the kids and work. It's fine. I just need some space. She hesitated, then asked quietly, Is it true? About Dad? I swallowed. Yes. He wants a divorce. He's already moved out. The silence stretched until she whispered, Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. Then she asked the question that dug in deeper than she knew. Why didn't you stay with Daniel? I told her what happened. How I showed up uninvited. How Rachel's family was there. And how Daniel, my son, looked at me like I was a guest at the wrong party. She didn't defend him. Not really. But when she admitted she'd known about Rachel's pregnancy for a week and hadn't told me, I felt something inside shift again. Not anger. Not exactly. More like recognition, like the final piece clicking into place. I had been slowly disappearing for years. When we hung up, I lay down fully dressed, no toothbrush, no nightgown, nothing. Just exhaustion. I hadn't slept alone in a bed like this since before I married Tom. And yet, for all its cold emptiness, the silence felt clean, honest. In the morning, I would buy a change of clothes, a toothbrush, maybe even a notebook. But that night, I made a decision. I would not return to my old life, because there was no old life left to return to, only the possibility of something new. The days that followed were quiet, eerily so, but also strangely clarifying. I found a rhythm that was mine alone. Mornings began with slow coffee by the window of my temporary hotel room, afternoons spent wandering the small shops of downtown Willow Creek, and evenings journaling in a simple notebook I'd picked up at the pharmacy. I hadn't written anything personal in years, but now I needed to. Karen, an old acquaintance from my volunteer work at the community center, became an unexpected lifeline. When I called her, voice trembling, and said I needed a place to live, she didn't ask questions. She simply said, Let's find you a fresh start. She showed me 3 places. One was too large, too full of echoes that might invite ghosts. Another too sleek, like a stage for someone I didn't recognize. But the last one, an in-law suite behind a quiet Victorian home on Maple Avenue, felt different. It wasn't grand, it wasn't stylish, but it was warm, peaceful. It had a little garden patio with potted herbs and a bay window perfect for a reading chair. When I moved in, I brought very little from my old life. A few books, my grandmother's tea set, and a framed photo of Emily and Daniel toddlers. Smiling, messy, still mine. I left the rest behind, not because it didn't matter, but because I was learning that I could matter more. The first night in my new space, I cried. Not from sadness, not entirely, but from release. No one needed anything from me. I wasn't anyone's wife. I wasn't Mom or Mrs. Crawford. I was just Linda. And that was terrifying and beautiful. Emily visited a few days later. We drank tea under soft string lights, and she said, "You seem lighter." I told her I didn't feel light, not yet, but I did feel present. That, I realized, was new. Tom called. Several times, he wanted to meet, to talk, to explain. I listened, then calmly told him I wasn't ready to revisit a marriage he had so easily walked away from. He didn't expect that. I think he thought I'd be waiting, shattered, grateful for crumbs. Daniel sent a message, a vague, "Hope you're okay." It was polite, distant, but I didn't answer. Not out of bitterness, just out of self-respect. He had shown me where I stood, and I was learning to believe him. One Wednesday evening, I walked into a watercolor class at the community center. My hands trembled as I held the brush, watching paint bloom on the page like something alive. The instructor smiled. "Water does what water wants to do," she said. "You can't control it. You can only learn to move with it." That night, as I watched the sky darken beyond my window and felt Oscar, the elderly cat I'd adopted, curl beside me, I realized something. I wasn't rebuilding my old life. I was creating a new one, not defined by what I had lost, but by who I was becoming. It's strange, really, how life unravels and then quietly weaves itself into something new. In the beginning, I thought I was losing everything: my husband, my home, my place in my children's lives. But somewhere between heartbreak and solitude, between morning coffee and watercolor paint, I found something far more precious. I found myself. Not the version who lived to keep peace, to make dinner, to hold everyone else together, but the woman who dreamed before she became a wife. The woman who now smiles at her own reflection, not because she has it all figured out, but because she finally matters to herself. Tom and I did meet again. Not to reconcile, but to speak like old friends. There was pain, yes, but also truth, respect, and closure. Daniel has since called more often, with fewer apologies and more curiosity. Emily visits regularly, and sometimes I catch her watching me as if trying to understand this new version of her mother. I think she's proud. The future isn't perfectly mapped out. I still have moments of doubt, of aching loneliness, but now I meet them with strength I didn't know I had. Because for the first time in my life, I am choosing myself. And that, at 60, feels the bravest thing I've ever done. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, even just a little, please subscribe to Life Stories for more real, honest, and heartfelt journeys. New videos every week, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. See you soon.